Hey guys, tonight we're heading back in time. Not to a grand palace or blood-soaked battlefield, but to something far humbler, quieter, and honestly, a lot more satisfying. A riverside village in ancient Vietnam, where the air is thick with wood smoke and clay pots bubble with stew so rich you can smell it through history. You're barefoot ankle deep in rust-colored soil, watching the first rays of sun melt across the water buffalo tracks. The river murmurs nearby, and just beyond it, women sit in circles, their hands gliding over wet clay, with the same rhythm they've used for generations. One hums a tune you don't recognize, but it settles under your skin like you've always known it. And then someone hands you a clump of red earth and says, "Make it breathe." No instructions. Just that. You'll try to mold it into a pot, and spoiler, it's going to look like a squashed coconut, because shaping a pot by hand is harder than it looks, especially when half the village is watching you. Try not to drop it in the mud. You probably won't survive this, as in you might die of embarrassment when the local kid makes a perfect pot in 2 minutes flat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The smell of wood smoke is already in your clothes. You rub your palms together and feel the grit of fine iron-rich dust, the same earth that generations have shaped into bowls, jugs, incense burners, and the occasional bat-shaped amulet for warding off bad harvests. Clays everywhere, beneath your nails, in your hair, on your tongue somehow. You hear the elders talk about how the soil sings. You smile politely, but they're serious. They say the best clay gives off a certain hum when you knead it low like a cat's purr. The pots are formed without wheels, just coiled by hand, smoothed with water, and a piece of polished bamboo. There's a woman named Ba Yen who can make one blindfolded. She claims the pot tells her where it wants to bend. It's either mysticism or muscle memory, or both. Mainstream history tells us that Vietnamese ceramics date back thousands of years, some pieces from the Dong Son culture around 1000 BC are still intact, their spiral motifs burned deep into our collective memory. But here in your sleepy village timeline, you're just trying to make the thing not cave in. A boy leans over and says, "If your pot falls, the rice spirits will haunt your dreams." He's definitely messing with you. Probably. One pot nearby has the strangest shape, wider at the base, like it's been stepped on by a water buffalo. That's intentional, someone says. It's designed to hold a thick porridge that bubbles so violently any narrower base would tip. There are pots for soups, for grilling, for drying herbs, even for catching rainwater, and blessing it with lotus petals before cooking. Every curve has meaning. A fringe theory among archaeologists, one they rarely publish but love to argue over, after a few drinks, suggests that early potters used rhythmic chanting not just to pass the time, but to influence the vibration of the clay's moisture content. Basically, ancient ASMR. Historians still argue whether that's genius or nonsense, but hey, your lopsided pot seems to wobble less when you hum. The kiln master, an old man with one good eye and a permanent scowl, walks by. He nods at your creation. Ugly. But maybe it'll hold soup. High praise. You leave your pot to dry in the sun, placing a little rice grain offering inside. to tempt the fire spirits into going easy on it during the bake. Not mandatory, just tradition. But you do it anyway. You're starting to get it. You sit back on your heels, the sun warming your face, and take a slow breath. In this village, every meal begins long before the first flame. It begins here, in the dirt, with clay patience and a little song. The next morning, you're back at it, hands already sticky with red clay, under the cool shade of a thatched awning. You're surrounded by the soft percussion of palms slapping coils into shape, and the occasional grunt when a pot caves in or cracks. Someone's rooster is crowing like it has a grudge, and somewhere off to the side, Ba Yen is muttering something to her pot again. She's in the zone. You try to copy her movements. The gentle roll of the heel of the hand, the wet bamboo smoothing tool dragging in perfect spirals. She hums, as always, off-key and haunting. A lullaby or a warning. Maybe both. You're not pressing deep enough, she says, without looking. The pot won't breathe. You blink. The pot won't. What now? She presses a single finger to your damp clay, right near the base, and you swear you feel something give like a faint sigh from within the pot itself. See, she says, eyes crinkling. It's waking up. You're not entirely sure if she's joking or if you've stumbled into a Miyazaki film. In many ancient Vietnamese villages, pots were believed to hold not just food, but life. They carried heat, moisture, and spirit. There were even rules about where certain pots could be placed in the house, depending on their use, and how recently a family member had passed. A pot for water must never sit near a hearth where pork had just been stewed. Why, something about spiritual contamination, or maybe just the smell. You learn about the different kinds of clay used, too. Not all earth is created equal. The soft, pale clay from riverside banks makes beautiful decorative jars but cracks under heat. The rich iron-heavy clay from deeper inland is tougher, darker, and holds up in fire. You watch them mix the two like wine-adjusting ratios based on the season humidity, even the phase of the moon. A younger boy next to you drops a half-formed bowl. It flattens with a wet splurt. He shrugs and says, "It was cursed anyway." You're tempted to believe him. A quirky side fact, some ancient potters wore blindfolds intentionally while shaping, believing it helped them see the form inside the clay better. It's not widely practiced now, except by a few stubborn elders who also insist the pots taste better that way. Historians still argue whether this was an early meditative practice or just a way to humble the apprentices. As the morning wears on, your fingers ache, but you start to feel a rhythm, a slight tug here, a thumb press there. The pot begins to hold its shape, still ugly, yes, but with a kind of stubborn personality. The kiln master walks past again. Still ugly, he mutters, but now it looks like it might have something to say. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a threat. Lunchtime approaches, and the air starts to carry sharper scents. Shallots, sizzling in lard fermented shrimp paste, dancing on the wind. A few women carry their dried pots toward the kiln. It's time for fire. Time to make the pots permanent. You glance at yours, now drying slowly under the sun, and wonder if it'll survive. There's a saying here, "Chin lan nao chua bang mot lan nung 9 times cooking can't match 1 firing." And it's true. Once your pot has faced the flame, there's no going back. It's hardened, sealed forever. You're quietly hoping it doesn't explode in the kiln and take 3 other pots with it. Ba Yen gives you a smile and pats your shoulder. If it breaks the pot, gods didn't like your hands. But maybe next time. You laugh, but part of you starts whispering a little apology to the clay, just in case. The fire starts small. Someone strikes flint, and the first flames lick at the dry wood stacked beneath the dome-shaped kiln. A dog barks once uninterested and lies back down with a dusty sigh. You step closer, already feeling the heat on your shins. The kiln's been used so many times it hums with its own memory. Blackened stone, scorched brick, and the faint smell of ash soaked into every crack. You hear it before you see it, the low roar building like a hungry stomach. The fire's alive now. Not chaotic, but focused, fed with a specific rhythm of wood and air. And your pot, it's inside. The kilnmaster's hands move in a way that looks random until you realize it's all timed. Every log added, every gap left open, it's a calculated dance. You try to ask him about it, but he just grunts. You don't tell the fire what to do. You ask. Outside lunch prep is in full swing. A group of women squat around a low clay stove, dropping pieces of marinated pork belly into a heavy pot. The smell hits like a warm slap, salty, sweet, smoky. There's lemongrass, fish sauce, garlic. Your stomach makes a sound that could be interpreted as ancient reverence. That pot, it's not just a container, it participates. The thick clay walls hold heat differently, spreading it slowly, steadily, allowing flavors to build without burning. A metal pot, too harsh, too fast. Clay, on the other hand, whispers the fire's warmth evenly across your dish. The pork browns at the edges, the fat renders, slow the sauce, thickens, like a secret being told one drop at a time. Mainstream fact time. Clay pot cooking has been central to Vietnamese cuisine for over 2 millennia. Archaeological digs around the Red River Delta have uncovered pots used for everything from cooking rice to fermenting fish sauce, many still bearing traces of ancient soot and char. It's culinary archaeology, basically. And it still smells amazing. The women argue about what should go in next, caramelized sugar or tamarind. One insists eel stew tastes better in unglazed pots. Another says only glazed interiors stop the stew from turning bitter. You nod like you have a clue. You don't. You're just waiting to be handed a bowl. Someone shouts. A puff of black smoke shoots from the kiln. The master doesn't flinch, just a pot collapsing, weak clay. You hold your breath. Is it yours? Probably, maybe. Let's not think about it. A fringe belief still held in some villages: if a pot explodes during firing, it absorbed too much bad energy to key from its maker. You're mentally replaying every sarcastic thought you've had this week. Still, no one seems panicked. The kiln is a teacher, they say. It keeps what's strong and returns what's not. That pot that exploded its shards will be ground back into grog, recycled into the next batch of clay. Nothing truly wasted, except maybe your ego. Over by the stew, someone hands you a piece of rice cracker and a ladleful of the eel soup. It's dark, murky, delicious. The pot it came from is heavy and warm, even off the fire. You grip it with both hands and take slow, reverent bites. The taste clings to your mouth, like a song, quirky tidbit. Some old recipes actually required that the pot be buried in warm earth, for a night before serving. Supposedly this mellowed the flavor and allowed the dish to sleep and finish dreaming. Modern chefs have mostly dropped that step. Turns out dirt isn't a great marketing tool, but the poetry of it remains. Historians still argue whether these traditions came from culinary experimentation or spiritual belief. But standing here soup in hand, watching smoke curl skyward, it's honestly hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. By evening, the fire calms, the kiln cools, your pot. You'll find out in the morning if it survived. But for now, you're full smoky, slightly anxious, and entirely at peace. Dawn comes slowly draped in fog, and the sound of frogs finishing their night shift. You shuffle toward the kiln barefoot, half asleep, your fingers twitching with anticipation. Today's the day. The kiln master is already there, sitting cross-legged, drinking a bitter tea that smells like something you'd use to clean an old wound. He doesn't say anything, just raises one eyebrow and jerks his chin toward the dome. You peek inside, and there it is. Your pot, still ugly but intact. A little scorched one side, puffed out like a frog's cheek, but not exploded, not cursed. And to everyone's surprise, even yours, it rings when tapped. A clear, resonant toka sign of even density, no hidden cracks. You cradle it in your arms like a newborn. It's still warm, still slightly dusty with ash. You hold it close to your chest and whisper, "Thanks for not dying." Someone laughs behind you. It's the boy who made the perfect pot on day one. He points at the pot and says, "Now you need to test it with a real beast." The beast is a mudfish, a whole one, alive, big, slimy, angry. You're handed a net and pointed toward a nearby muddy inlet. There's no ceremony. Just a lot of screaming and splashing as the fish promptly escapes the net, doubles back, and slaps you in the leg. Twice. You eventually catch it using a trick you saw someone do yesterday by shoving the net underwater and yelling threats. That part may not have helped. Back in the village, the fish is unceremoniously plopped into your new pot, along with herbs, chili, turmeric, and enough lemongrass to mask any guilt about what you're about to do. A flat stone seals the top. The whole thing goes into a bed of coals. You watch nervous. The pot must endure direct heat, bubbling broth, and the psychic wrath of a fish that definitely still remembers you. Here's a fun fringe fact. Some potters believed certain fish held grudges and would find ways to burst inferior pots from the inside. This led to special talismans being carved into the clay near the base. Your pot has none of these, so you stand very still, just in case. Mainstream historians agree clay pots were crucial in taming high-fat, high-moisture ingredients in Vietnamese wetland diets, fish eels, frogs. These dishes cooked low and slow, sealed in earthy prisons until the proteins surrendered and the broth turned syrupy. Some recipes took 3 hours, others days. Someone hands you a woven fan. Your job now is to keep the coals at a gentle smolder. Not too hot or the pot could crack. Not too cold or the fish will turn rubbery. It's a balancing act, one breath at a time. It feels meditative or maddening, sometimes both. After what feels like forever, you lift the stone lid. Steam escapes in a hiss that smells like river spice and triumph. The fish has collapsed into a silky golden stew. The pot is flawless. The village claps. You've earned a nod from Ba Yen and the kiln master. He shrugs. Still ugly, he says, but it listens. You eat in silence. The fish is tender. The sauce clings to rice like it's in love. The pot stays warm long after the fire's out, like it's proud of itself. You place it near your sleeping mat later that night, not because you're afraid it'll run away, but because part of you thinks it might hum again in the dark. Historians still debate whether pots were owned in the modern sense. In some rural areas, they were considered family members. Broken pots were mourned. Repaired ones were treated with more respect than a drunk uncle. Yours, you're already planning its next meal. It's festival day. You wake to the sound of gongs echoing through the trees, sharp and bright, chased by the deep rumble of drums bouncing off the hills. The whole village smells like sticky rice and charcoal, and the paths are packed with people in woven tunics, barefoot kids carrying bundles of banana leaves, and dogs that clearly haven't been fed yet but are pretending to be part of the ceremony. You carry your pot, not because you were told to, but because everyone else is. It turns out that on feast days, the pot you use says a lot about who you are. You didn't know this. Now you're holding yours a bit awkwardly, like someone brought a paper plate to a royal banquet. Ba Yen has a pot with 3 rings etched around its neck, symbolizing her 3 grown sons, all warriors. The woman next to her has a squat little pot with a broken handle, but it's painted with tiny white dots. She tells you, smiling, that it was her mother's, then adds it boils rice sweeter than any man can. You nod. This tracks. In ancient Vietnam, clay pots weren't just tools. They were code. Size, shape, glaze, and markings could indicate clan marital status, occupation, even what region you came from. One particular style, wide bella, thin neck, looped handles, was known to be given as a wedding dowry. Another, flat-bottomed and shallow, was used only by healers for decoctions brewed under moonlight. A mainstream fact, archaeologists use these differences to map trade patterns and cultural shifts over centuries. It's like reading a diary written in mud. You glance at your own pot again, a little uneven, a little burnt, but hey, it holds fish. That counts for something. As the feast begins, you help carry pots to the main communal hearth. Flames leap, pots line up like sleepy soldiers, and the air becomes one long savory chant. Grilled sticky rice, braised bamboo shoots, pork marinated in palm sugar, and black vinegar. Every dish sizzles in its own clay womb. There's a moment where you watch steam curl from 20 pots at once, rising, mixing, dancing. It feels holy. And then someone makes a toast with rice wine that smells like it's been fermenting since the Bronze Age. You accept a cup, instantly regret it, and try not to show it. Your throat is on fire. Ba Yen cackles, quirky aside. Some villages still believe a pot remembers everything that's been cooked in it. That's why certain dishes are always made in certain pots. There's one family here that hasn't cleaned their faux pot in over a decade. It's seasoned, they say. Just scrape the sides. You smile weakly and change the subject. Nearby, 2 young men argue about whether cracked pots should be retired or revered. One says cracks let in bad luck. The other insists that a cracked pot, if it still holds water, proves resilience. Historians still argue whether pots were buried intentionally after breaking, or whether that was a symbolic return of the vessel to the earth. Either way, it seems nobody just throws them out. You're told that at the end of today's festival, some pots will be offered back to the river as thanks. Yours is safe for now. But there's a quiet dignity in knowing that even a well-used pot might end its days in ceremony, not trash. As night falls, the gongs return slower now, more like a heartbeat than a war cry. People sit close together, passing bowls of sticky rice, slurping soup in companionable silence. Your pot rests near your feet, warm from use, humming with everything it's held today. You feel full, not just from the food, but from the stories, the steam, the thousand unspoken traditions you've stepped into without even realizing. You're starting to see clay pots, not just as objects, but as language. And tonight they're speaking loud and clear. Crack. It's the worst sound you can hear in a village that worships its cookware. You freeze head whipping toward the noise. A hush ripples through the courtyard, like someone just insulted the rice spirits. One of the elders' ceremonial pots, tall glazed, painted with faded cranes, is split clean down one side. It didn't fall. It didn't burn. It just cracked. Silence stretches longer than seems reasonable for a broken kitchen item. Then someone mutters, "The spirits have spoken." You're about to laugh. You don't. Everyone looks dead serious. But Yen steps forward and places one hand over the pot's crack, whispering something too soft to hear. Then she carefully picks it up, cradling it like an injured bird. It's not dramatic. It's reverent. Turns out when pots break in this village, it's not just an inconvenience. It's an event. People gather. Offerings are made. Sometimes there's a meal in its honor. Sometimes a funeral. You follow the group out of the main square and into a quiet corner of the forest. There, beneath a banyan tree, lies a small pit, a pot grave. Some vessels are intact, but too old to use. Others are shattered, their pieces arranged with care. You place your hand on one and feel the ghost of heat still inside. In ancient Vietnamese animist traditions, it was believed that everything had a spirit, even inanimate objects. A good pot, especially one that had served faithfully through many meals, earned respect. Sometimes bits of rice or fruit were buried with it. In rare cases, names were carved into the shards, though a mainstream historical fact at certain archaeological sites in Vietnam, like the Go Mun and Phung Nguyen cultures' burial plots, have been found containing intentionally broken pottery, suggesting symbolic offerings to ancestors or deities. Whether those were meals for the dead or markers of gratitude, no one agrees. You return to the village with a strange new weight in your chest. It's just a pot, right? But now it doesn't feel like just anything. It feels like a story cut short. Later, as you clean your own pot after a small evening stew, you notice a tiny hairline crack near the rim. Panic grips you for a second, but it's superficial. Maybe. You run your finger over it, but Yen walks past and sees the look on your face. "Don't worry," she says. "If it breaks, it goes home." Home? To the earth. That's where it came from. She tells you that some potters actually plan for the death of their pots. They leave imperfections, slight flaws that will one day give way on purpose. Because nothing is meant to last forever. It's better, she says, for something to break after it's been full of life. Quirky detail. There's a myth that if you bury a broken pot in a rice field and sing to it, the next harvest will be sweeter. No one can prove this, but every year someone tries. Historians still argue whether these rituals around broken pottery were widespread cultural norms or regional folklore. But you don't need a consensus. You saw it. You felt it. And now every time you touch your pot, ugly functional, slightly cracked, you feel that pulse. Like something just under the surface still remembers fire and steam and soup and hands that shaped it out of mud with nothing but intention and patience. You place the pot back by the hearth, give it a little nod and whisper, "Not today." Wind off the coast shifts. You smell salt before you see sails, bright slashes of color rising beyond the mangroves. The village children rush to the riverbank, shouting warnings and welcomes all at once. Foreign traders have arrived. They come every season, longboats heavy with fabric beads, and the occasional rusty blade that everyone pretends is magical. You watch as they disembark, laughing in strange rhythms, offering trinkets in exchange for pots. That's right. They've come for the clay. Not gold, not spice, not silk. Clay. Vietnamese pottery. Dense heat. Resistant, beautiful, even in its imperfections, was legendary. It traveled farther than its makers did. Vessels with red slip glaze and geometric carvings have been found as far away as Indonesia, the Philippines, and even Japan. A mainstream historical fact. During the late first millennium CE, Vietnamese ceramics were a top export in Southeast Asia. The designs evolved to reflect foreign tastes, yet kept their earthy heart. You see it here now, barter in action. A simple soup pot is traded for a swatch of dyed cotton. A fish stew vessel earns a bronze mirror. One young trader is mesmerized by a clay teapot, shaped like a water buffalo, clearly meant more for show than function. He offers a silver bangle. Ba Yen nods. You start to notice the changes creeping into local pots. The shapes get narrower, the lips thinner. Some sport handles, now an innovation not native to your riverside world. And the glazes, suddenly there's blue. Not the dark smoke of ash, but vibrant cobalt, as if someone bottled the sky. The older potters grumble. They want fragile, one says, holding up a delicately glazed bowl. Looks nice, breaks faster. It's not for cooking, another snorts. Just for looking. Might as well make dolls. Quirky tidbit. Some of these foreign-style pots became so popular that local potters forgot their own designs. For nearly a century in one coastal province, no one made the old wide-bottomed rice pots at all. They vanished. Only came back recently, thanks to a nostalgic cooking show. Historians still argue whether this shift was driven by economics or colonial pressure. Did Vietnamese potters choose to adapt, or were they nudged by demand? Was it innovation or quiet erosion, like the tide pulling at your ankles while you smile for the camera? You try shaping one of the newer styles later that evening. It's sleek, elegant, but it doesn't feel right. The clay resists somehow. Or maybe it's your hands that do. Ba Yen watches silently, then hands you your old pot. "It's yours," she says. "Keep it. Burn things in it. Let it blacken. That's what it's for." You nod. There's beauty in change. Sure. But also power in remembering. In holding on to a shape that fed generations before anyone could spell aesthetic. As night falls, the traders light fires by their boats. Drums echo. Someone dances in a red sash, their feet throwing dust and sparks. You sit near your pot, tracing the tiny crack again, and realize it looks almost like a river. Maybe everything eventually flows into something else. But even rivers remember their source. The stars are out now, and the air has cooled just enough to make the clay beneath your feet feel damp again. You're alone by the hearth, stirring a simple rice porridge in your pot. Just rice water and a pinch of salt. After all the spices and fish and feast day theatrics, this is exactly what you crave. Simple, slow, steamy. The pot simmers without complaint. No cracks, no dramatic boil-overs. Just quiet gurgles and the occasional plink as a bubble bursts. You sit cross-legged, elbows on knees, eyelids heavier with each passing minute. It's strange how much this lump of baked dirt means to you now. You think about where it came from. The mud on your first day, the failed coils, the teasing kids, the terrifying kiln. You remember the eel stew, the festival, the riverbank deals, the broken pot's funeral. And here you are, ending the journey with nothing but rice and heat and silence. Mainstream fact, for the sleepy-minded, rice porridge, or chow, is one of Vietnam's oldest staple dishes. It was used to feed infants, the sick, the elderly, anyone who needed comfort more than flavor. And the best chow always cooked in clay, because metal gets too hot and the rice sticks. But in clay, the porridge doesn't rush. It blooms. You ladle some into a bowl, let it cool, and take a bite. It tastes like calm. Bayen appears beside you silently, like she always does. She sits, lifts her own bowl, and says, "You've made it. Breathe." You blink, then laugh. "Took me long enough." She shrugs. "Takes as long as it takes. Pots don't hurry. Neither should we." Quirky belief time in some villages. It's said that the last pot you use before death carries your spirit onward. That's why elders often have a retirement pot kept pristine and unused until their time comes. You look at your slightly scorched, slightly off-kilter little pot and think, yeah, I could travel with that. Historians still argue whether such customs reflect ancestor worship or are just sentimental nonsense. But under this sky, with your full belly and sleepy bones, you don't care. It feels right. You lie back, letting the warmth from the dying fire curl around your feet. Your pot sits beside you, still warm, still humming. Or maybe that's just the frogs. The stars blur. You're not sure when your eyes close, but your breath slows. Your thoughts soften, and everything, the village, the pot, the centuries between you and the past, melts into one long, delicious exhale. And now, wind down 300 words. The pot cools slowly as the coals fade to embers, their soft orange light flickering across your resting face. Everything is still. No more shouting, no more fire. No more fish that leap from nets like tiny muscular ghosts. Just this warmth breath and the echo of old songs humming from clay walls. You feel your fingers loosen your muscles, unclench your mind, uncoil like steam rising from the last bowl of porridge. The village fades into the background, a gentle blur of shadows and soft voices telling stories that don't need endings. In the dark, you can almost hear your pot whisper, "You did fine. You made something. You fed people. You remembered." And isn't that enough? Even now, as your thoughts drift towards sleep, you imagine the pot's surface cooling like skin after sun. You picture the gentle crack along its rim, your mark, your story, etched into its memory forever. No shame in it. Nothing broken stays empty long. The stars overhead blink slowly. like eyes half closed, like a sky that's nodding off. And you're already halfway gone, floating gently downstream in a clay pot, just big enough to carry a dream. Soft now, slower still. The fire's out, but the warmth remains. End of script. Sweet dreams.